button. So let's wait for the stream to fire up all across the internet, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. We always need to wait for YouTube to get cranking, and it looks like it's almost there. But there it is. We're live. So let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon our very system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today. We've got a lot to get to. We're going to be moving quickly, but we're going to start the show by taking a look at what's going on with this pipeline hack. Some interesting things are happening here. The FBI is confirming that they know more or less who the organization behind this hack is and where they're located. So we want to piece that together a little bit and then kind of show you what's going on the East Coast. Maybe you're living it. Maybe you do not want to see any more of it. But the fact is, this is a big deal, right? This isn't a sort of an attack on the infrastructure of the United States. And this is, we're seeing more and more of this stuff happen as time goes by. We saw the SolarWinds hack, and the list goes on and on. So we're going to break down what is happening there. We've got Homeland Security Director Advisor Elizabeth Sherwood-Randall, who is out now sort of, everybody's trying to figure out how to maneuver around this slow-moving disaster that's happening on the East Coast. So we're going to break down a lot of what's taking place with the pipeline hack. Then we're going to talk about Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci is somebody that we haven't really spoken much about on this channel because of some of the concerns about, even talking about COVID. But it's looking like maybe we are moving beyond that a little bit. We're able to sort of look backwards and ask some questions. That's exactly what Congress was doing today. Senator Rand Paul had Dr. Anthony Fauci in front of Congress today, and they started getting into some questions about the origin of the coronavirus. Was this something that sort of naturally evolved from a wet market in China, or is this something that was manufactured or evolved through gain of function research that took place out of the Wuhan lab in China? And so, now we're looking back, we're sort of looking backwards, asking questions about what happened here. Where did this come from? And maybe we should do some further digging. So we're going to talk about that. We have Tucker Carlson is also talking about this. There was a great article that was written by a guy named Wade that I did a deep dive on this weekend, and so I'm going to give you a sneak preview of that as well. Very interesting stuff happening here about the origin of this, and it's looking like it's a little bit more complicated than just, some bat fell out of the sky and infected the whole planet. So we're going to look into that as well. Then we got to wrap up the show by talking about what's happening in the Middle East. So if you look on the news anywhere, you're seeing that a lot of activity, a lot of rockets and missiles being shot both directions in what seems to be total madness over there. And we've got some clips that I have gathered over from Twitter this afternoon that look like, this thing is not good. We have the Prime Minister from Israel, the Benjamin Netanyahu, who is out saying that this actually might get worse before it gets any better. And so we want to break down what's happening there as well. If you want to participate in the show, if you want to throw a comment or ask a question or even have a criticism about something that I said or covered or whatever, then feel free to do that. It's over at our platform at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. It's a little bit of a subscription community that we're building over there to kind of encourage people to get off of the other big tech platforms, go lay a brick in another platform that helps to, sort of support free speech and free thinking and free ideas. It's over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And when you're over there, if you want to ask a question, there's a live chat that's happening right now as we're recording this, where if you ask a question, Miss Faith, who is right in that room behind me, she's going to clip it and add it into my slides, and then we'll be able to get to it. So let's get into the news. And before we do, I want to thank you for your support once again over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right. The United States is quickly running out of gas because one of the country's largest pipelines is basically shut down, and the federal government is trying to figure out what to do about this. Kind of an important thing that we all rely on a day-to-day basis, gasoline. Whether you've got a Tesla or an EV or whatever, you still use gasoline because other people use it in order to bring you your food to your grocery store and to your restaurants, and the list goes on and on. So when transportation comes screeching to a halt, everything comes screeching to a halt, and everybody is sort of bracing for impact. Now, the good news here is that the company that is behind running this pipeline, they're saying that they're expecting to have some improvements or some ability to restart the transportation of the fuel by the end of the week. We'll see whether or not they hit that target. So what I want to do is show you sort of what the country is doing, what we are doing as a nation to respond to this. Obviously, this is a big problem. I don't necessarily see this as a Democrat versus a Republican type of an issue. This is the entire country, okay? We're Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberal, BLM, and police officers. They all live on the East Coast, and so they're all being impacted by this at the hands of some foreign entity, some foreign organization called DarkSide that is now holding half of our country hostage under this ransomware. So we want to break this down. We want to make sure that the full force of the federal government is rectifying this problem. This is kind of what they are created to do, is to solve these types of crises. So hopefully they're springing into action so that everybody else can return back to some normalcy. So the first story I want to go through is from the Wall Street Journal. They give us a little bit of a better breakdown. Yesterday, when we covered this story, it was new. There was a lot of information that really hadn't been sifted through. So the Wall Street Journal has now assembled it all, and so they give us a nice synopsis. So let's dig into this article. It says here, U.S. blames a criminal group in the Colonial Pipeline hack. And we knew some of this yesterday. DarkSide is a ransomware organization that is believed to be based in Eastern Europe, says it has no connection to foreign governments. Which is, who knows whether or not you believe that, right? They're all going to claim that, and all the governments are going to disavow them anyways. A criminal gang believed to be based in Eastern Europe was involved in the hack that led to the shutdown of the main pipeline supplying gasoline and diesel fuel onto the East Coast. Biden and others decried the ransomware attack that was used as a growing global problem. The organization is known as DarkSide, relatively new hacking group. Western security researchers say is likely based out of Eastern Europe, possibly in Russia. The organization created the malicious computer code that resulted in the shutdown. The FBI confirms that the DarkSide ransomware is responsible for the compromise of the Colonial Pipeline Networks, said an FBI spokesman on Monday. Quote, "We continue to work with the company and our government partners on the investigation." And so, I'm not real familiar with how, the governmental intricacies of running pipelines are, but you're going to imagine that there are many, many layers of bureaucracy that they're going to be having to work through, and it's across a massive scale. I mean, we went through the length of the pipeline. We've got a slide on it today just showing you how long the pipeline is. I mean, it goes all the way down from basically the Gulf of Mexico up into, I think, New Jersey, that entire span of the East Coast, even into the Gulf area. So a lot is going on. You've got multiple state governments. You've got multiple federal agencies. It's a big project, and they're trying to ramp this thing back up by the end of the week, and a lot of people are relying on that. So the hack of the pipeline disclosed over the weekend has prompted intense concern among senior U.S. officials within the Biden administration, many of whom have already viewed ransomware as a digital blight capable of jeopardizing national and economic security. Ransomware is a practice hackers use to lock up computer systems and demand payment from victims for their release. So Biden and the Russian government didn't appear to have a hand in this, so said Biden. Annie Neuberger, Deputy National Security Advisor for the Cyber and Emerging Technology, said during a separate White House press briefing that officials believe that DarkSide was a criminal group, confirmed that the Colonial shut down its networks before the ransomware infected any of its operational systems. Asked if there were possible ties to the Russian government and other groups, Ms. Neuberger said, "Our intelligence agencies are looking for any ties to nation-state actors. In Russia, China, and elsewhere, the line between criminal hacking groups and state-backed cyber operations is often murky." Security experts say as governments often tolerate criminal activity as long as it targeted overseas and sometimes recruit hackers from those groups to carry out their own objectives. Right? And we've seen a lot of this, sort of the idea that China and Russia and even some of these, the North Koreans and some of these other smaller countries, rather than investing in traditional warfare or traditional defense strategies, things like, buying tanks and weapons and firearms and missiles and, building a space program. It's very expensive. What if you just set up a couple warehouses with the best computers and some of the smartest people in the world in there, working night and day, writing code and, sort of trying to breach different cybersecurity systems throughout the country, or throughout the world. kind of seems like one is more obtainable than the other, and we're seeing more and more of this. And when SolarWinds happened on this channel, I was like, this is wild stuff. And what concerns me more than anything about these stories is that they all just kind of go away. They all just kind of come up and then just go away. SolarWinds, wow, this was like a national thing. Everybody was hitting the panic button. You had federal agencies across the entire country going, whoa, right? This is a big, big deal. They've compromised a lot. Then off the story. It's just gone. It's like gone a week later. Nobody even talks about it. Did they patch that? Did they root that out? Did somebody update the virus software over there at Microsoft? I mean, is this going to be an ongoing problem? Because it is. We have another one where another one of our critical infrastructure, segments of our entire economy are falling prey to a group of hackers that nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows where they came from. Dark side. All right. Over in Eastern Europe, maybe Russia. Great. So, the question is, what are we doing with our government if we've got all of these, alphabet agencies that invest billions and trillions of dollars over the course of my lifetime into providing national security? Why do our cyber systems seem to be so vulnerable where they're knocking out the fuel grid for half the country? Okay, this wasn't somebody's Facebook profile got hacked. No, I can't post anymore, Mom. What should I do? This is a big deal. And it just happened, not too long ago. And so I think this is more of a, if you want to call it this, a systemic failure from the government. We are dropping the ball all over the place on these types of infractions from uncertain actors from around the world. And, apparently there's only one system in this country that is immune from this. There's only one system, and it's, of course, the election system. Everything else falls pretty easily. Earlier on Monday, DarkSide posted a statement on the dark web claiming that its goal was solely to make money, denied that it was connected to a foreign government. DarkSide's statement didn't directly mention the pipeline, whose 5,500-mile pipeline from the Gulf Coast to Linden, New Jersey, has been offline for 4 days following a ransomware attack. We are apolitical. We do not participate in geopolitics, they said. Our goal is to make money, not creating problems for society. So they're good capitalists, just like anybody else. The group that posted the statement didn't respond to a request for comment, which is unfortunate. The statement didn't say how much money was being demanded. U.S. officials, cybersecurity investigators involved in responding to the hack have viewed DarkSide as the leading suspect in the attack since its discovery last week, according to people familiar with the matter. They've come to that determination in part due to commonalities in the malicious code used in the attack that it linked to previous attacks carried out by the group. FBI on Friday sent out an internal all points bulletin asking for any information about the DarkSide group. According to two people familiar with the matter, FBI didn't immediately respond to comment either. So, okay, so that's great. Good news. Nobody really knows what's going on with this DarkSide group, and not real sure what the update is. We've got gas stations, meanwhile, are running dry. We are seeing this all over the East Coast. They're beginning to run out of fuel as the biggest petroleum attack keeps fuel shut down for days. From Virginia to Florida to Alabama, stations are reporting they've sold out of gasoline supplies. Estimated 7% of gas stations were out as of late on Monday. And we talked about this yesterday. Remember I said yesterday, I was telling you the story in Arizona. One of our pipelines went out, I think when I was in high school. And it was a big problem. I mean, the whole state freaked out about this, and for a long time. And it was a weird situation because any time that somebody saw a gas truck, I mean, one of the big, semi trucks that have the big cylinder hauling the gasoline down the road, people would follow the truck. So, oh, where's that going? I'm going to follow that over to Circle K or to 7-Eleven or to QT or whatever. And they would just, follow these trucks around, waiting for gasoline. It was like something out of Mad Max or one of these bizarre movies. And so I'm really hopeful that this doesn't happen over there because it was a weird situation. And what happens, I think, psychologically, is this whole thing is just toilet paper version 2.0. It's the same thing. When you're driving home and you see that there's a bunch of cars lined up at a gas station, you go, uh-oh, they're getting gas. I probably should get gas. Maybe I'll stop and fill up my tank. And so everybody does that. And then now, rather than people driving around on semi-filled gas tanks, somebody's driving around in a quarter tank. That guy's on a full tank. He just filled up, but she's on a half tank, quarter tank, third of a tank. Everybody's now full all the time. They got to be full. As soon as they drop down a quarter tank, they go, oh, gas, got to get it. As soon as they see it. So now supply can't catch up because the demand is too heavy. And so we saw this in Arizona, and it was kind of a crazy thing. So I'm hopeful that it doesn't get to that point, but it's looking like maybe it will, and we're going to see where this goes. We have an image here that was posted over from Atlanta Gas stations in Atlanta were suffering from shortages on Monday as a result of the hack. It says out of all gas besides diesel due to a gas shortage. See another one over here from Olivia Iverson over on Twitter. And she posted this yesterday, right? Out of gas, I watched car after car drive through the Circle K on Massachusetts and Mobile Highway, only to find that they're out of regular gas, only diesel. Tonight at 4 and 5, we're looking into the area-wide outage that's behind it. And she posted this yesterday. Okay, this is when it was just heating up. Extremely high demand for those who have gas today. I counted around 30 cars in line at the station outside the Walmart on Mobile, only a handful of pumps that aren't taped off. So everybody's just out. Taking a look at the gas. All right, so the Colonial Pipeline, we can see, has been shut down since late Friday. On Monday, FBI pointed the finger at DarkSide, while Joe Biden stopped short of blaming the Kremlin, said there is evidence that the hackers or the software they used are in Russia. Chief Executive Officer from Colonial, Joe Blount, and a top lieutenant assured Deputy Energy Secretary David Turk and state-level officials the company has complete operational control of the pipeline and won't restart shipments until the ransomware has been neutralized. So it sounds like maybe they've actually sort of opened up sort of a backup system to maintain control of the pipeline, but their operational systems are... The software is not capable of controlling or operating the pipeline. They maintain control of it, but it's not operational because they've severed it from normal functioning. So I'm botching this. Let's go back to the article. All right, moving on. The dwindling supplies come just as the nation's energy industry was preparing to meet stronger fuel demand from summer travel. Americans are once again commuting to the office and booking flights. East Coast is losing around 1.2 million barrels a day of gasoline supply. So the Green New Deal people must be happy about this. The Asheville, North Carolina clerk at an Exxon station says, I'm currently out of gas. Sign offering unleaded gasoline for $2.69, otherwise out of service. So we've got some more shortages. Gasoline prices initially surged 4.2%. All right, DarkSide said in a post on the dark web that it wasn't to blame. Ransomware cases involving hacker CD. Okay, let's see this. They hinted that an affiliate group may have been behind the attack. The group promised to do a better job of screening customers that buy its malware. So we've got DarkSide is being very ethical now. They're saying next time we do this, we're going to screen the people who want to implement our attacks. Government officials have not advised Colonial on whether it ought to pay the ransom. Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technologies, Annie Neuberger, said during a briefing. So they're actually talking about, just pay it. Yeah, I mean, just pay it. It's not that, how much is, what are they asking for? Do we know? Do we know how much they want? How much is it? Because gas is going to be pretty expensive soon, and you're going to have to weigh it. What's the cost of just paying it? We have, it's all hands on deck, says the U.S. Secretary Gina Raimondo. We're working closely with the company and everybody else. White House pulled together an interagency task force to address the breach, including exploring options for lessening its impact. According to an official, Biden can invoke an array of emergency powers. Some rules curbing domestic transportation have been let up to help deal with any shortages. The Northeast can secure gasoline shipments from Europe, but it will come at an increasing cost the longer the pipeline stays shut. In the meantime, fuel producers, including Marathon, are weighing alternatives for how to ship their product. All right, so the problems just continue to compound. Once again, here is the pipeline, and you can see how far along this goes. And the image that we just got was from Atlanta. So even right about here, right, we're already losing gasoline. The Daily Mail is saying, who else is being held to ransom? So now there's some ideas that maybe this is going to extend into other industries or into other companies, right? Into other segments of our country, whether it's national infrastructure or whether it's just private business. I remember seeing a story, I think back during the COVID era, where there was some hacking group that got control, I think, of a hospital somewhere or one of the internal infrastructure, power grids or something within a hospital, and they were ransomwaring the software. And right, that's a big problem. All right, people are dropping dead because of your ransomware. That's a little bit different than locking somebody out of their Instagram account or something. Big deal. Daily Mail now is asking who else is involved in this. They launched cyber attacks more than 24 other companies after they shut down the pipeline. At least 24 other unnamed companies were also affected. that were also helped by other companies and U.S. agencies. So gas stations from Florida, officials have warned the attack shows how vulnerable the U.S. is to cyber attacks, which is, something we've been screaming about. Biden said on Monday, we need to invest and safeguard our critical infrastructure. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm said the attack tells you how utterly vulnerable we are to cyber attacks. Okay, so, all right. Are we going to do anything about it or not? Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo warned that such attacks are here to stay. DarkSide posted an apology on the dark web and said they did not want social consequences, nor do they want political influence. So that's nice of them. Here is a cybersecurity expert who's sort of explaining how this works because I just botched it earlier. Here he is.
With this group, though, who's told to be called the DarkSide group, it's a ransomware group. They're a criminal network. Normally what we've seen them do is compromise edge devices to get into these networks. So think firewalls or your ability to access the networks. Those types of appliances are getting exploited directly, which leads them to getting into those environments. And then the adversary's team, the humans, go through and spread throughout that network, figure out what's most important to the victim, steal it, and then start locking up systems. As it relates to the networks being brought down, what we understand at this point is that Colonial did that proactively. They took down their operations networks to make sure that nothing spread into those systems, thus hopefully making a temporary outage versus something that would be more sustained. But as these industries transform, we're seeing a lot of digital transformation across every industrial company in the world. As those things transform, realize you're exposing yourself to new vulnerability. You're exposing yourself to new access for these adversaries. And these groups are realizing that by targeting industrial companies, they get higher payouts, and the companies are more willing to pay out because they want to return these vital operations. Infrastructure communities do historically lag other industries in terms of their spending on cybersecurity. The U.S. is not lagging other parts of the world, but we're getting hit a lot more, and we're a more digital society, so we have more availability for those threats. However, the first thing that people want to do is blame the infrastructure companies. Why aren't you spending more? Why aren't you doing more? In reality, they're listening to the standards and regulations and best practices and frameworks out there, which prioritize more than 75% of every one of those standards prioritizes that preventative focus. And so without understanding what's in your environment, without monitoring it, without getting to detection and response, that prevention atrophies over time, and it changes over time, and it lessens in values.
Yeah, solid. So you know what that reminded me of? If you are somebody who's about my age, 35, I remember when I was growing up, there was this sort of platform battle, right, between Microsoft Windows and Apple when I was younger. And, Windows was always the superior operating system, or it was always bigger, let's say, not superior, just triggered everybody in the comments. But it's always sort of been the bigger operating system. It's Goliath versus David. And it was something where there was always a debate where the people who were a part of the Apple ecosystem would say, well, we don't get any viruses, right? Our system is secure. We don't have any viruses. Over on Windows 95, Windows 2000, Windows 98, you always have to install virus software. And it was a big problem back in that era because it was always a virus. Or something was always crashing, the blue screen of death, and it was a big issue. And so there was always McAfee and Norton, and then we had Kaspersky, and all of these different virus softwares, Nod, and the list goes on and on. I played around with a lot of them because I was a geek like that. I wanted the most secure system when I was a kid. So what we did is, we're always securing our systems. And the criticism from the Apple people, well, your system is always insecure because you have so many holes in it because you're on all of these different devices. And the response from the Windows people to the Apple people was always, well, people actually use our stuff. They actually are on Windows. That's why people are writing viruses for Windows. Nobody wants to write viruses for your, iPhone. There wasn't an iPhone back then. I know. Miss Faith is back there, jumping out of her seats because I'm ripping on Apple. But the point here is there was nobody operating on that ecosystem back in the 90s. There's a lot of people on iPhone now, all right? So don't beat me up over it. But they are... in that early era, nobody was writing software for them. So, maybe the United States infrastructure, as this gentleman is saying, is not that it's necessarily bad. It's just that the United States is the biggest. And so everybody wants to attack our infrastructure. And so you got to respond proportionally. So now that I just alienated half the audience on the Mac versus PC debate, let's move on. We have the we have a gas shortage. Hashtag was trending on Twitter today over from Elizabeth Sherwood-Randall. She's the Homeland Security Advisor, and she said, this was earlier today, said that there is not a supply shortage of gas following a ransomware attack on Colonial Pipelines, which disrupted the flow of nearly half the gasoline and jet fuel supplies to the East Coast. So this was trending today, which was kind of hilarious, and this is something that I saw sort of a theme of this on Twitter today. Here was the New York Times also saying that there have been no long lines or major price hikes. Okay, and this wasn't yesterday. This was today. This was this morning, 6:25 a.m. We just showed you pictures yesterday saying there's no gas anywhere. And New York Times this morning says, no, hold on. Since the shutdown, there have been no long lines or major price hikes for gasoline. Here's what to know. So they post the article, basically trying to, massage, do damage control for the whole thing. Don't freak out. Meanwhile, everybody's freaking out. Here's what's happening. Gas station in Robinville, all out of gas. Clerk manager said it was 5 days before they have gas again. Says phones have been ringing off the hook. People calling around to find gas. And this was posted yesterday. This is the gas station across the street. Long line again. Very reminiscent of what we saw here in Arizona. Gas lines, 93 octane only. Gas shortage. Looks like it's out of North Carolina and Asheville.
I'm in Asheville, and lines are already here. Some of the pumps, it looks like they're out of anything but 93 octane, and some have bags over them. So the run on gas is happening live here.
Yeah, and so he posted that this morning. Here's another one from QT. This is crazy. I stopped for gas just now, having no idea what was happening. It's out. People here told me they'd been to other stations and they found the same thing. So
it's the QT gas station on Celanese around 9:30 at night. They are out of gas. Everybody sitting here is not getting gas. Everything except diesel is out. What they just told me.
Yeah, so the New York Times was a little bit off on that. And we have here, we can see this. It says, weird. I saw at least 20 cars lined up at the only gas station open in Asheville last night. And so they're all sort of retweeting this. Gaslighting from the New York Times. We have Amy Curtis says, don't pull a muscle carrying all that water for Biden. This is not the truth. If you talk to almost anyone in North Carolina, it's crazy. I'm not sure why this story isn't a big deal in the media, but it's weird. And yeah, the question is, why do they do this? Why is the media doing this? And let me get my comments up open here. For some reason, my slides are not updating again. Very annoying. All right. So Miss Faith is going to send me some comments here in a quick second, I think, and then we'll jump into those. Before we change gears. All right. So we're going to get back to those. We'll save those for the end of the next segment. I don't know why my slides aren't syncing today. Apologies. We'll do better. I promise. I'm embarrassed. I'm just ashamed of myself. All right. Well, let's continue moving on. We've got our next segment. So we've all had a lot of questions about COVID. Where did it come from? How did it get here? Where did it start? And for a long time, this has been something that you have not been allowed to even talk about. But now that we're sort of over the hump, we have vaccines rolling out. Congress people, really in our Senate, in our House of Representatives, they're starting to look backwards. They want to say, maybe it's worth an investigation. It's worth further inquiry to determine really what happened, because it happened so quickly. The government was just responding. We had national lockdowns. We had all these different mandates, stay-at-home orders, and it was such chaos that we didn't really have a good debrief about what started this all. And so people are starting to ask those questions. And since we're not talking about COVID specifically, we're not talking about the disease itself, in other words, about what it does to you medically speaking, we're not talking about any medical component of it at all. I think it's safe that we can ask the same questions. We can look backwards and see what the government is asking. In particular, today, we had Dr. Rand Paul, who was also in Congress today with Dr. Anthony Fauci, asking him questions in particular about the the birth of the coronavirus. Where did this come from? And so I have a deep dive that I want to do on this topic because I went through this article that was written by a guy named Wade. I'm going to show you a little bit about here in a second. I did a very deep dive on it, but I want to go through and give you a summation of this from another blogger who summarizes this for us very nicely. His name is Allah Pundit, and he's over at Hot Air, and he said Rand Paul clashes with Fauci. Didn't your agency fund gain-of-function research in connection with the Wuhan Virology Institute? Rand Paul asks Dr. Fauci. So I want to go through this. He says, look, if you're coming to this fresh, you'll be lost. And he's right. He says, if you watched Tucker Carlson talk about it last night, you'll be better prepared. And if you read this magisterial analysis by science writer Nicholas Wade a few days ago, you'll be really prepared. So 2 things on this. We're going to show you Tucker Carlson. He did a full segment about this last night. And I actually have a couple gripes with the segment because I watched some of it and I think he was a little bit off. I think he was sort of jumping the gun on going after Fauci, right? And I think he was sort of trying to make a connection where there wasn't one that has been proven yet. It looks like there is a strong connection there, but it just hasn't been proven yet. So I think Tucker was just a little bit ahead of himself, but it's still a very good analysis, and he's bringing up some good questions. So we've got Tucker Carlson, and then we have this Nicholas Wade who wrote a separate article, which is very, very in-depth. If you go on his Substack and read it, I would really encourage you to do it, but it's a long article. It is 45 minutes long if you read it, and it is something that I spent a lot of the weekend actually reading and dissecting because I followed all of the links into all of the different tributaries of information, and it is a rabbit hole, let me tell you. So I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of what I found, but I also want to just sort of put this all in context. What we're talking about is this bigger idea about where the coronavirus originated. Did it come from a bat? Did it come from a wet market? Was this something that was naturally evolving? Or did this come from a lab based off of some gain-of-function research that was being done sort of in semi-public, clandestine operations? The whole thing is just sort of mired in government bureaucracy and secrecy and shrouded in different layers of, incompetence. And so we're all trying to unravel that. What happened here? Because we don't want this to happen again. Nobody wants to go through this again. So if human beings caused it, wouldn't it be a good idea to figure that out and to then unwind that, sort of peel the layers back so that we can figure out the source so that we can know not to do it again? That's really what my interest here is. And so what's happening now is Congress is asking questions. Rand Paul is asking questions. Different government officials are trying to dive into this. And Allah Pundit at Hot Air summarizes it for us best. He says, I'll sum it up as best I can. The NIH, which is the National Institute for Health or Health, NIH, which is Fauci's agency is a part of, has given grants in the past to a nonprofit called EcoHealth Alliance, which hunts emerging viruses. Okay, so we have the NIH, we have EcoHealth Alliance, and they hunt emerging viruses. And one of the places they do that is in China. And so literally there's a team of people in China that they go to different remote parts of China and they gather specimens. They gather bats and, guano and all sorts of things and bring them back to labs, try to identify new viruses, or viri or whatever, so that they can create vaccines and so they can study them in order to treat them. So they say of the 3.7 million that EcoHealth received from the NIH before 2019, 76,000 per year was given to, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So about 80 grand a year given to them for their research on bat viruses. So I'm going to show you in the next slide a sort of a connection diagram. But here it says, while apparently it's true that the Wuhan lab didn't receive money directly from the NIH, some of NIH's money ended up in their coffers via the EcoHealth Alliance as the middleman. So you've got a lot of these moving parts. And if you read the entire Nathaniel Wade article, you're going to see a lot of it. It's a lot, right? It's an undertaking. So when I was reading through it, I broke it down into these separate parts. And I want to run you through kind of what's happening here. So as we all know, we have Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci is somebody that has been seared into our images over the last 12 months. Well, he has an organization that is somehow connected to the NIH, which is a national agency, right? Here, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, turning discovery into health. And so they have a relationship, some sort of an agreement working together. Then the NIH funds the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases to study allergies and infectious diseases. Well, what do? They fund those grants to a different company called EcoHealth Alliance, which is run by this guy called Dr. Daszak, which is somebody that Tucker talks about, also in the Nathaniel Wade article, who is the person who drafted the Lancet article, which is all part of sort of this kind of a public relations arm, which I'll talk about in a different video. But he funds this, which then goes out and has different media connections, does these different interviews, promulgating the idea that the coronavirus was natural, that it did not come from a lab. And so he's got this little propaganda arm that's kind of doing all of this in conjunction with all of these other agencies to cover for the fact that what was really happening is that Dr. Daszak used the funds that came over from NIH through the NIAID back down to EcoHealth through Dr. Daszak down to Dr. Shi, the Bat Lady. The Bat Lady now was actually in Wuhan doing these experiments and actually going out there and doing these gain of function, research maneuvers. So all of this now was sort of, covered up allegedly by the World Health Organization. That was also sort of in the back pocket of China and Wuhan. And so the question then becomes, what level of involvement was Dr. Fauci? What was he doing? Because he's the person who's sort of the U.S. side of this entire chain, and people are asking questions about it. The Nathaniel Wade argument goes through these 4 different factors in his article, talking about where did it come from? Was it natural or did it originate in a lab? And so he goes through the place of origin. He goes through the natural evolution of the virus. He goes through the furin cleavage site. He goes into the codons that are on the actual RNA of the virus, right? And so there's a lot in that article, some heavy lifting, but if you want to read into it, you'll see what his conclusion is, and it's pretty unequivocal. Now, we go back to the Allah Pundit article, and he says the head of EcoHealth has spoken on the record before about Wuhan scientists tinkering with the genome of bat viruses they harvest. The point of tinkering, in theory, is that by making the viruses more infectious to humans in the lab, scientists can see how viruses might mutate into something dangerous out in the wild. Then they can start producing therapies and vaccines to treat them now before they cause the pandemic. They're trying to get ahead of the natural evolution in a laboratory setting to anticipate how it might progress in order to suppress it. The problem of tinkering is that you're creating precisely the sort of virus that could cause a pandemic. Is what he says. So they're trying to get ahead of it. They're doing all of these experimentations to try to make a really bad virus so that they can combat it. So that if they have a virus that's in a little petri dish in their lab, they can start working on vaccines and therapeutics that will combat the virus. Well, what happens then if that petri dish escapes? Well, we just live through it. Theoretically, potentially. People are asking questions. Nobody knows about this yet because there really isn't evidence. Dr. Shi, the Bat Lady, who I just referenced in the prior slide, then teamed up with Ralph Barrick, an eminent coronavirus researcher at the University of North Carolina. Their work focused on enhancing the ability of the bat viruses to attack humans so as to, quote, examine the emergence potential. In pursuit of the same, in 2015, they created a novel virus by taking the backbone of SARS-1, replacing its spike protein with one from a bat virus known as SHC04-CoV. This manufactured virus was able to infect the cells of the human airway, at least when tested against a lab culture of such cells. The virus is known as a chimera. Its genome contains genetic material, and this goes on and on and on. So what the concept here is that Fauci is somehow involved in this. And Allah Pundit wraps up his argument. He says, there's no smoking gun here. We don't know if SARS-CoV-2 escaped from a lab. We don't know if the NIH money was instrumental in its gain-of-function research. We don't know if Fauci approved the funding of or if EcoHealth Alliance violated the terms of the grant. But Fauci seems to have no good answers in this exchange with Paul, apart from insisting that the NIH never funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology. No one's saying they did, though. The allegation is that they funded EcoHealth Alliance, and EcoHealth then redirected the money to Wuhan to fund gain of function, which may or may not have produced and accidentally released the virus that causes COVID, right? It's an important question. Okay, nobody's directly making accusations yet, but people are asking questions. And currently, Fauci's responses have not been all that good. Now, Tucker Carlson was out there last night saying, more specifically, why isn't there a criminal investigation into Fauci's role in the pandemic? Monday, Tucker said that the possibility that the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases director, Anthony Fauci, he's the director over there, how about that, had a role in research that could have led to the spread of COVID. He asked whether it warranted a criminal investigation. Carlson offered a theory that the coronavirus originated from the Wuhan Institute, and Fauci had signed off on funding of the gain-of-function research on viruses like COVID-19. So I've got a quick clip from Tucker from last night. It was a long segment. I think it was about 10 minutes long. So I encourage you to go watch the whole thing. There's a little segment here where he's referencing the Nathaniel Wade article, which, again, is very good. Really encourage you to read that if you're interested in it. It's a long one and some heavy lifting in there, but well worth it. But in that article, the way I read it, is Wade was being actually sort of deferential to Fauci. He didn't write the article saying Fauci's responsible for this through the connection, through the NIH, or through the Allergy and Infectious Diseases Organization. He basically says that Fauci was just kind of a good spokesperson, just a good foot soldier, and that he's not really responsible for it. So, take it for what it's worth. Now, here Tucker Carlson comes in and then sort of characterizes that differently, saying that this article was written essentially to incriminate Dr. Fauci, and I did not read it that way at all. That being said, still some very important questions are being asked, because if, as I've been saying, if this was human caused, if we are responsible for this in some way, shape, or form, we need to know that, and we need to get to the root of that so that we don't do it again. And if we just sort of bury our heads in the sand and just say, well, no, it came from a bat out of a wet market, let's move on. Let's just forget about it. Nobody asked questions. Nobody talked to the Chinese. Nobody wants to anger them. They own half the country anyways. We want to make sure that we get to the bottom of this so that it does not happen again. Here's Tucker from last night.
Monday, how do we assess the Biden administration's response to COVID? Well, here's one marker. It tells you pretty much everything that the White House, that is supposedly so committed to science, chose.
All right, so for some reason,
even cannot recommend more strongly a new piece by Nicholas Wade, who for more than 50 years has been one of the preeminent science writers in the world. For 30 years, Nicholas Wade worked for the New York Times. He edited the science section there, but this piece did not run in the New York Times. It ran on Medium. And the piece explains where this virus almost certainly came from. In it, Nicholas Wade makes it clear that more than any other single living American, Tony Fauci is responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic. Wade lays out a nearly insurmountably large amount of evidence that this virus originated at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in central China. It seemed to make sense. This show and others had raised the possibility from the early days of the pandemic. But this piece all but proves it. At the time the outbreak began last fall, the Wuhan lab was conducting experiments on how to make bat viruses infectious to human beings. Those experiments were funded by American tax dollars. Those experiments were, their funding, approved and directed by Tony Fauci in Washington.
All right. So again, I think it's a little bit much there. Now, if you read the article, then yes, you can sort of reverse engineer that. You can take that back. You can walk that back from the virus is wrecking the world, back to Wuhan, back to the NIAID, back to the NIH, back to Tony Fauci. You can certainly make that logical leap, but I just haven't seen the evidence there yet. And we now know that Dr. Fauci is also under question, right? I mean, we have him testifying in Congress today. We have Dr. Rand Paul, who was there. Actually, hang on one second. We have a little bit of a technical difficulty, so I'm going to open up a different slide, and we'll be able to get the questions. Now, for some reason, I don't know if anybody can help me with this, but we use PowerPoint, and we sync up on multiple computers. So I work at my home office, I work in my office, I work here in the studio. Faith works on the same PowerPoint file, but sometimes it just won't sync up. It'll be the exact file that I want in my office, but then when I come here in the studio, it doesn't sync, and it looks like it's syncing, and then it just disappears. So it is quite frustrating, I will tell you that. But let me reopen this and then get over to the next clip so that I can play this, because these are some good clips. This came over from Rand Paul today, who was in Congress discussing things with Anthony Fauci.
Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute
Do they fund
of Virology.
Dr. Barrick?
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrett's gain-of-function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina.
You don't think inserting
China.
a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain of function?
That is
you would
not
be in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain of function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain of function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
So do you still support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
We do not send money now to the Wuhan Virology Institute.
Do you support sending money? We did, under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. It was a sub-agency and a sub-grant. Do you support the money from NIH that was going to the Wuhan Institute?
Let me explain to you why that was done. The SARS-CoV-1 originated in bats in China. It would have been irresponsible of us if we did not investigate the bat viruses and the serology to see who might have been infected.
Or perhaps it would be
China.
irresponsible to send it to the Chinese government that we may not be able to trust with this knowledge and with this incredibly dangerous viruses. Government scientists like yourself who favor gain-of-function research.
I don't favor gain-of-function research in China. You are saying things that are not correct.
All right, so you're going to see they are going to be mincing words over this stuff for a very long time. And what I mean by that is you're going to see just different conversations about what certain words mean. What does gain of function mean? Well, no, I mean, we just heard two different interpretations of it. Rand Paul says you support gain of function. He says, no, I don't. And well, what does that, what does that mean? What different clinical mechanisms or procedures or, lab experiments are gain of function and what are not? And are there differing degrees of this? Is there a gray area where it's kind of gain of function, or is it only gain of function when, the virus grows arms and does cartwheels? At that point in time, well, that was a successful gain of function analysis. I don't know what the standards are. And there's probably many different degrees of this, just like we see in criminal law. We've got all these different degrees of use of force and all of these, there's a lot of gray area in this. And a lot of these bureaucrats, of course, are going to hide right in the middle of that. And it's going to be difficult for us to sort of dissect what exactly is going on. Then we also have another clip over here where they're wrapping up.
You in front of this group categorically say that the COVID-19 could not have occurred through serial passage in a laboratory?
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on in China. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
You do support it in the U.S. We have 11 labs doing it, and you have allowed it here. We have a committee to do it, but the committee has granted every exemption. You're fooling with Mother Nature here. You're allowing super viruses to be created with a 15% mortality. It's very dangerous. I think it was a huge mistake to share this with China, and it's a huge mistake to allow this to continue in the United States. And we should be very careful to investigate where this virus came from.
I fully agree that you should investigate where the virus came from. But again, we have not funded gain-of-function research on this virus in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, no matter how many times you say it.
There was research. There was research done with Dr. Shi and Dr. Barrick. They have collaborated on gain-of-function research where they enhanced the SARS virus to infect human airway cells, and they did it by merging a new spike protein on it. That is gain-of-function. That was joint research between the Wuhan Institute and Dr. Barrick. You can't deny it.
Senator Paul, your time.
Yeah, so it's one of two things. Either they're going to be mincing words over what gain of function means, or as you heard him say there, nope, the NIH did not fund any gain of function research in the Wuhan Virology Institute. Okay, and very clearly. All right, so, but you did fund Eco Alliance, right, and Dr. Danzig, right, and they funded Dr. Shi, Bat Lady, in Wuhan, in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, right? So we know that you didn't just go from point A to point Z, but we know that you were the person, allegedly, according to Rand Paul, that you connected the dots. You funded the original research with Eco Health Alliance that then funded the litany of other endeavors down the line. So it's once again, it's politicians just sort of being politicians. Now, if you think that Dr. Fauci is not a politician at this point, okay, I disagree with that. All right, let's go into some questions. First one comes from Chascal, who says, looks like you're using Windows and not Mac OS. That's probably the first problem, that we're on Windows. We have Seen and Unseen says, is it just me, or does this demonstrate that the dangers of what happens when a pipeline isn't available? Yet Biden still gets praised for immediately shutting one down in his first days. And I think that's accurate. And there was the energy secretary, I think today, was in front of the press corps answering this question specifically. They said, hey, if the pipeline's down, how else are you going to get fuel around to everybody else? What else are you going to do? You're going to put it on a boat? She said, yeah, actually, we're going to look at deep port entries. We're going to try to maneuver them around to different ports around the coast. We're going to be putting them on trucks. We're going to be doing everything that we can. But a pipeline is the best. A pipeline is really the best way to do it. It's kind of the easiest and quickest. And she said that, and the RNC research team is like, see, we've been telling you that for a long time. Why don't you reopen Keystone while we're at it? Don't hold your breath on that. We have Woodworking Medic says, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but just seems suspicious that the infrastructure plan was introduced and it's basically the Green New Deal. Now we have another pipeline shut down after the Keystone. Seems fishy, but that's just me. Liberty or Death says, White House was asked today what the probability of using rail cars would be to ship the gas. White House said the pipeline was the best way to transport the fuel. Cool, huh? But I thought the Keystone XL pipeline was bad. Yeah, exactly right. Pipelines are good for transporting, liquid and gaseous fuels, but they're not. Apparently they're not green, though. Norovirus says, this is all crisis generation by the Biden administration. There will be multiple reports where, yes, there is a shortage. No, there is no shortage. Main goal is to panic people. New panic now that COVID is over. Once gas is restored, there will be a surplus as the pipeline is not working at 100% capacity, like 75% or so. And yeah, I've seen that actually. And that makes sense to me. That they would sort of operate at about 70% capacity with the ability to ramp it up. I think in these types of industries, that's kind of what you want. In case that there is an emergency, you ramp that sucker up. And you don't want to be redlining. You don't always want to be at 100%. Sort of like when you're burning fat. You don't want to be sprinting all the time because you'll wear your body out. Just a nice little jog, right? Get the blood flowing. That's what you want. Just like the blood of oil running through our infrastructure. Next up, we have Jeremy Matrita says, I've spent some time learning about the latest viruses. They're pretty impressive. They usually start with a very well-crafted phishing email, which the user falls for. He's talking about not the coronavirus. He's talking about software virus. The code is also sophisticated, gets around antivirus by using a lot of random steps in the code that slowly pieces itself together, gaining administrative rights, then disabling critical system processes that basically tell the antivirus, this is not the code you're looking for. So it's sort of like a Jedi Knight virus. Thank you for that, Jeremy. We got Liberty says, question, none of the Kung Flu vaccines are FDA approved yet. Our school is likely going to mandate a vaccine in order to come back to campus. Do you think that is legal? I remember your stance on being required to take it to appear in court. Just curious. Oh, gosh, I don't even know, Liberty. That's a good question. What is the legality of that? I think that this is going to be a constitutional issue. I mean, I think the Supreme Court will ultimately have to sort of deal with this. We're going to have all sorts of mandates and there are going to be objections to it. I mean, what if the school says, yeah, you got to take this vaccine to come back, and you say, well, I have a religious objection to that? Which one of those things wins? And there's all sorts of federal legislation on, equal anti-discrimination. That's not my area of law. So for me to opine on it is outside of my hula hoop for sure. But I don't like the idea that you have to be mandated to put something into your body in order to participate in regular life. But I know there's a lot of people who disagree with that. We have _shade says viruses have patents, which is marking businesses' stocks. There's a trail over 20 years old. They have been manipulating viruses also worldwide, not just China. CDC and the NIH has a lot to answer to. It's a game. They're all covering for each other, just like everything else. We've got Jeremy says, social network analysis is fascinating and the useful tool in connecting people to organizations and events. I'm sure it was used to connect the dots on Dr. Fauci and the Blovid virus. We've got Nadarb says, just so you and everyone else knows, Alex Jones said this a year ago. Just saying. Maybe he isn't as crazy as they make him out to be. Good to see you, Nadarb. We got Liberty in the house says, this all sounds like a video game coming to life. Isn't there a game where there was a virus that a corporation was messing around with and it got out and created death and destruction? I hope everyone has their zombie hunting equipment. Faith, time to kit up, girl. Strap up, Faith. So, this reminds me of a book I read. There's a Dan Brown book out there. I can't remember the name of it. Dan Brown's the guy who wrote the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons and Inception Point. I've read most of his stuff. I think it's one of his newer books where there's a virus. Maybe it's one of the older ones. It might have been Inception Point. I think it might have been Inception Point, where he's talking about there is a virus. This is all fictional. There's a virus that actually sort of gets out into the world, and Robert Langdon and whoever the girl is in the novel, they have to go and stop this virus from getting out. And it's this, a mysterious race against time in Dan Brown fashion. I love his novels. They're sort of like guilty pleasure, but they're fun. And they're trying to race against time to stop this virus from getting out. Nobody knows what this virus does, but there's this mastermind person that has this AI system and all this stuff. So virus gets out. They come upon the scene where the virus was going to be released into the city's water supply, and they get there and the virus is already out. It's already been out. Probably already been out for months, maybe years. And what is it? It's one of these viruses that sort of go into your body and inject some sort of, it modifies your genome essentially, and it makes a certain segment of the population infertile. And it's doing this because the AI system has sort of calculated that human population, we're sort of in this ticking time bomb where eventually there's going to be too many people on the planet, and we're sort of going to kill ourselves. So the AI, in conjunction with this evil mastermind, create this virus that they release, and it infects the whole world, but nobody knows about it. It just goes in there and kind of turns off your reproductive rights, your ability to reproduce, and it's only for a third of the world. And the AI calculated that this was going to whittle back down the human, reproductive numbers in a way that's not going to wreck the planet. Which was a fictional book. That's a little too close to home, isn't it? We have Leafy Bug in the house says, the Chinese are claiming the COVID-19 virus originated from a cave 1,000 miles away from Wuhan. The alternative explanation is a leak from a lab. The Chinese explanation is not impossible, but the latter seems more likely. It's a great summation of it, Leafy Bug, and that's really where I stand on this whole thing. It's like, listen, we don't know. That's the whole point. We don't know. Chinese say it's natural. We know how much we can trust sort of the biggest adversary to the United States in the world. Not much. So maybe it's worth asking some other questions. And if our government had a hand in this, and if we're funding gain of function research, maybe the American people want to have a say on that. Maybe there's a conversation to be had around that policy decision. We have NY Renal MD in the house says, during the Obama admin, gain of function was shut down due to concerns. Seems people went around it by diverting funds from other areas. There were safety concerns at the Wuhan lab. There was no way to know without an investigation. And yes, we saw that. I think I talked about this. Actually, I'm not sure I talked about it on this channel because we really haven't spoken much about the COVID stuff. But there was another article that was, I think it was in the Nathaniel Wade article where he specifically talks about that there was a lot of problems in 2016, 17, and 18, where basically that they're saying these labs are different scalability, they're different levels of safety. So you have like safety level 4, 3, 2, and 1, and you're only supposed to do gain of function research at a level 4 lab, while Wuhan was like a level 2 lab. So why were they doing that type of intense research at a level 2 lab that didn't have the requirements, the safety protocols that are necessary that would be associated with a level 4 lab? And so they were beating their fists about it. This was a problem, has been a problem for some time. Anki Wo says there was a Chinese report about 5 years ago covering how to use coronaviruses as a bioweapon, detailing best conditions under which to release it. Chinese began working on a COVID vaccine January 6, 2 weeks before they admitted it, hid it while they secretly tried to get a head start on the vaccine. I did see those headlines around. I think I bookmarked something on Twitter that there is a sort of a leaked Chinese military document that is talking about viruses as weapons. Scary world. Very, very scary stuff. We got E. Dantes in the house says, one of the major issues in our political and governmental system is there is no accountability. They have these hearings, accusations are made and refuted, but nothing ever really gets solved. The opposing party will rally around that person and give them cover. No one is ever accountable. Comes from examples, Lois Lerner, Fauci, etc., etc. Totally agree with you, Edon Test. Totally agree with you. And I think that it is so important that we just keep the pressure. Just keep talking about this stuff, because the more we discuss it, I think the more sunlight we are able to shine down upon it, and that is a good thing. All right, so great questions. Thank you for those. And let me see if I can maneuver this a little bit. All right, so we're just going to continue on here. Okay, so final segment of the day, we're talking about the Middle East. The Middle East is still in a little bit of tense times, let's say that. We have rockets are now being fired both directions from Israel, outside and into Israel, and it's kind of a mess over there. And so we don't spend a lot of time on this channel talking geopolitics. And so we don't really have much of a point to say here other than to just sort of observe what's happening and just recognize that this stuff is still happening in the world, which is just really unfortunate. So here I want to start off by going back over to the Jerusalem Post. Netanyahu warns of long IDF Gaza campaign after a rocket barrage on Tel Aviv. 3 Israelis were killed on Tuesday, that's today, or probably nighttime over there now. Over 700 rockets were fired at Israel since Monday. Bus struck by a rocket in Holon, south of Tel Aviv. A woman was killed, another person was critically wounded in Rishon LeZion after terrorists in the Gaza Strip fired a barrage of rockets in the direction of Tel Aviv late Tuesday night, setting off sirens throughout the center of the country. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Benny Gantz gave a joint statement Tuesday night declaring that the violence will continue for some time. And that's kind of what it looks like, is both sides here kind of bracing for a long, extended conflict. Netanyahu, Defense Minister over in Israel, saying, brace yourselves, this stuff is coming and might be around for a little bit. We have a quick clip here of the scene from, I think this was on May 10th, I believe. Yeah, May 10th. This was an air raid siren that went off from Jerusalem. Eerie sound. So very ominous sound, not looking good. That was yesterday. Then right before we got on the show, I did a quick screen record of this clip. There's a city in Israel called Lod, and it's a mixed city. We have, it's mixed Arab, mixed Jewish city southeast of Tel Aviv. So apparently the mayor came on TV, just said on live TV, quote, "We have completely lost control of the city and the streets are witnessing a civil war between Arabs and Jews." And so this is a clip from that. And you can see it. What it looks So it kind of looks like they're setting up an autonomous zone over there, right? We're familiar with those here in Arizona. Now, sad stuff. Honestly, it bums me out that we're still fighting over this stuff. Hamas and Islamic Jihad have paid and will continue to pay for their actions, says Netanyahu. We are all mourning those killed, praying for those who were injured. Give our full support to the IDF and Israeli security forces. Campaign will take time. Israel has the right and obligation to act. Will continue to do so, says Gantz. Israel struck 500 targets, killing dozens of terrorists, said IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Aviv Kovadi. and we will continue extensive strikes against Gaza. So, now, as somebody who doesn't follow this stuff closely, I'm not Jewish, I'm not, Palestinian, and I am somebody who is, quite concerned about the state of our own country. When I watch this stuff, it just feels like to me, what we see from our media is just a propaganda war from both sides. Both sides come out and they just start telling us how it is, right? It's, suddenly, Israel is this massive victim that has been on the receiving end of, the weight of the world for a long period of time, if you listen to them and their news stories. Same thing on the other side of the aisle, right? The other side of the media say, no, they're the aggressors. They're the one that are responsible for all of the problems in the world. And neither one of them, those things is true. And my entire life, we've been dealing with this type of stuff. I mean, I remember as a kid watching these same images, watching, people throwing rocks at tanks going, what the heck are they doing? Are we still fighting over, what is this, religion? We're still fighting over this right now? I understand how important it is. I'm not trying to belittle this, but we're killing each other over a strip of land. I gotta confess some ignorance on it. I just don't get it. I understand it from a theocratic point of view and perspective, but I just don't get it. I don't know why we as a society can't solve this problem. The holy wars were what, 1200s? We're like 1,000 years later and we're still fighting this stuff. We didn't get it out of our system from like 1,000 to 1400 AD. We still got to keep doing this. All right. I guess we'll just keep doing it then. Emily Schrader says, shocking scenes from central Israel, Holon, where an autobus was hit directly by a rocket from Gaza. So here's this video. So nice, just out for an evening stroll, and you got rockets flying down into your neighborhood. So that's great. Earlier on Tuesday, which is today, 2 women were killed in barrages of rockets that struck down. One of the women was identified as Soma Satosh, an Indian national who worked as a caregiver for an elderly woman in Ashkelon. Santosh was killed in the strike while the elderly woman sustained various injuries. The rockets fired at Tel Aviv set off sirens. The barrage came after Israel bombed a 13-story building in Gaza. Over 700 rockets were fired into Israel from Gaza, including 150 that fell inside the strip and another 200 that were intercepted by the Iron Dome, which is one of the coolest things that you'll ever see, which we're going to look at in a minute. Prime Minister Netanyahu announced the intensity and the rate of attacks will increase. He said, we are in the midst of a campaign. Since yesterday, the IDF has been attacking hundreds of Hamas and Islamic Jihad sites in Gaza. We have neutralized commanders. We have hit many of their quality targets. Hamas will be struck in ways that it did not expect. The Israelis were killed. One woman in her 60s. Over 100 Israelis have been injured as close to a dozen buildings were hit by rockets. Israel has began targeting top terrorist commanders. The ATGM unit in Gaza City was prepared to carry out anti-tank guided missile attacks at the same time of the strike. Another Palestinian terrorist was killed. It was identified as Sama Abd al-Mamalek. The IDF and Shin Bet, Israeli security agency, said that he was attacked in a hideout together with a number of additional Islamic Jihad operatives. The IDF said that he was in charge of the PIJ's rocket arsenal. In another strike, another deputy commander of the Islamic Jihad Gaza Brigade was also killed when the IDF struck an apartment in an 8-story building in Gaza's Ramal neighborhood. He was the brother of Baha Abu al-Ada, who was killed in the Israeli targeted killing of 2019. So we've got an interesting couple clips here. I want to show you sort of what the Iron Dome looks like. I've always been fascinated with the Iron Dome, and I was reading about it again here on today on Wikipedia just to learn a little bit more about it. And it's this missile shield, really, that is very, very effective from what the numbers say. And basically what happens is when somebody fires a rocket over your airspace, you've got these different battery installations that are set up all around the perimeter of your country, and they cost $50 million a piece, and every single rocket that they shoot up is another $40,000, but they're worth it because they're knocking other rockets out of the sky and saving lives on the ground. So it's a crazy thing. One side shoots a rocket up into the air. The other side shoots a rocket up to hit the rocket that's flying through the air. to disable it so that the first rocket doesn't come down and land in a populated area. And you got to just understand, I mean, the physics of this. It's like shooting a gun and then shooting another gun to hit that bullet that came out of the first gun with your gun, just boom, and then hitting it. And they do it. It's crazy. So it's really impressive. And I want to show you a couple clips of this. Now this, I don't know that this is necessarily the Iron Dome. I think it is. Let's watch. So those explosions in the air are the two rockets meeting. The two missiles. We have another clip here. So watch this. This is from the Israel Defense Forces. It says raw footage. This is the moment the Iron Dome intercepted a barrage of rockets over Tel Aviv and central Israel. You can see here. Watch. So as I mentioned, you're watching these little explosions in the sky. These are two rockets going up and hitting each other and then exploding in the air so that they don't land on civilian territory. Here it is. Look at that. Very, very intense. Looks like something out of a movie or Star Wars or something like that. But every one of those is an enemy attack that is being exploded and intercepted by a defense system. It's crazy. All right, let's take a look at some questions from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got Jeremy Matrita says, Trump negotiated many deals during his tenure. Biden came in and immediately started talking to Iran and undoing peace in the Middle East. It's hard to argue with it. It's hard to argue with that, Jeremy. I mean, it's kind of a difference. Okay, we have like one approach to geopolitics. 3 months, 5 months later, here we go. We have a different version. Newbie of Death says, this is the result of the Balfour Declaration, not 1,200 years of religious differences. There you go. See, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Thank you for educating me. I'm going to have to look up what the Balfour Declaration is and what that's all about. We've got Nadar Blasier says, Dave Smith has a good bit about this. His solution, move Israel to Canada. All right, I like it. But Canada's rough right now. Have you listened to Viva? It's rough. I don't know that anybody wants to go to Canada right now. Oh my gosh. We got E. Dantes. I was going to make a Nazi joke, but I'm not going to do that. E. Dantes in the house says, my brother worked at the embassy in Jerusalem, retired in 2020. I was in Jerusalem last year and saw all this happening. The truth is they fire rockets almost every day. Only most of them are junk rockets that don't pose a threat. They are only to harass the Iron Dome. This time, these were more serious rockets, but confined to areas closer to Gaza Strip. One of the bigger issues this week was the craziness going on the Temple Mount Dome of the Rock. Looks like we have a follow-up here. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me because I have noticed this, like I said, my entire life. I've been, every year I've been alive, there's been conflict there on that strip of land, and it just seems like it's never ending, which is tiresome. And then our last question of the day comes from Tremendous in the house, says, I tend to agree with you. I try to understand the importance of holy lands, but God is everywhere. I think he would prefer that they stop killing people over some land and focus more on love thy neighbor. Then again, if the importance of the holy land is what you're taught your whole life, it's hard to make that point to the people that care so strongly about it. I feel for all the people who hurt living through this. And it's exactly my take on it, really. I mean, I get the importance of religion and spirituality and tradition and, sort of keeping the social fabric woven together tightly as it exists across generations and ages. Very much support that. Very strong favor of that. But not at the year is 2021. Okay. We should not be killing each other over this stuff anymore. Humbly, in my perspective on this thing. I think that you can have a spiritual connection with your Savior, with your higher power in many different shapes and forms. I'm not real sure what this is all about, this one strip of land that we have been killing each other my whole life and well beyond before that, well before I ever stepped foot on the planet. We're investing a lot of time, money, and most importantly, lives. There are kids over there right now, on both sides of the conflict that have to deal with, grown-ass adults throwing rockets at each other because of something. I don't know what it is. Okay, and I'm a religious person. I'm a Catholic person. I get it, right? If somebody was going to take out the Vatican, I'd be pissed about that. But can we work towards a solution? Because currently the only solution seems to be this just inevitable stalemate. And every so often we have a new flare-up, more dead people, billions more dollars being lobbed around all over the place, and no actual progress. I just want to see a little bit of progress. All right, so want to thank you for joining the program today. I want to thank those questions that came over from locals. Big thanks to our newest subscriber and supporter over there, guy by the name of Robute. Robute is in the house. Want to thank you for being here. Also want to remind you, we got a couple things coming up here on Zoom. We've got a monthly locals meetup via Zoom. Those are coming up on May 22nd, 7 to 8 p.m. I'm still creating a registration form for this, so I'm going to post that over on Locals. Then we also have on Saturday, June 26th, just about a month later, another meetup. So mark those 2 dates down, May 22nd, June 26th. These are going to be on Saturdays, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So it's going to be 4 p.m. Arizona time. And we're just going to chat. We're going to connect with one another, get to know each other, right? We were doing this sort of on Clubhouse, but it has, we're going to try it on Zoom. Maybe we'll go back to Clubhouse. Clubhouse is on Android now, so that's a thing. But we're going to do it on Zoom, so go over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com and register if you want to attend. And I hope that you do, because it's going to be fun. We're going to get to know each other and maybe come up with some ideas about where the community can go from here. Then mark another date, June 12th. We've got our law enforcement interaction training. This is going to be a live virtual seminar hosted by yours truly, also available for free over at Locals. So we're going to do this training on the basics of interacting with law enforcement, things like, cell phone confiscation, traffic stops, what happens if the police show up at your house, what happens when they pull you over, what should you say, what should you not say, and how to deal with the police, really. So it's going to be about a 2-hour workshop. I envision about 90 minutes, and then we'll leave about 30 minutes for questions. We'll take a break in there. I want to do some interactivity stuff, so I want you to sort of think this through. So if you've got, a young kid, if you've got somebody who's, about ready to get carted off to college, or somebody who's just driving, a high school kid, if you are let's say somebody who's dating, if you're that guy who's on Tinder, Tinder and Bumble and all of them, and you're out dating, it's scary out there, right? A lot of people out there that, might get you into a little bit of hot water. So you want to know how to deal with law enforcement when you're being questioned. And so that is coming up on June 12th. Once again, free for all Locals subscribers and supporters. So we want to just thank you for that. So if you're over there, check that out. You can also, if you support us, grab a free copy of my book. It's called Beginning to Winning. Download a copy of my existence systems. Download a copy of the slides and many other things. There's a lot of good stuff at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And before we get out of here, I am a criminal defense attorney. Just want to remind you of that. If you happen to know anybody in the state of Arizona who has been charged with a crime, we would be honored and humbled if you sent them our direction so that we had the opportunity to help. We love to help good people who've been charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and in their lives. And so if you know anybody who's facing DUI charges, domestic violence charges, misdemeanor offenses, felonies, if they want to clear up an old warrant or quash something that is suspending their license, we can help with that. If they want to apply for federal benefits or reinstate their right to vote or their ability to possess a firearm, there's a lot of things we can do to help sort of nudge people back on the right path. And so if you happen to know anybody who needs that help in the state of Arizona, we'd be honored and humbled if you sent them our way. We love what we do. We have a great team here, and we are very passionate about our work. We offer free case evaluations. Come on in. We'll give you a free copy of my book as well. And that is it from me, everybody. I want to thank you for being here. Apologies for some of the technical difficulties. We'll get those sorted out and fixed tomorrow. We're going to be back here same time, same place. It is at 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. Have a nice hearty dinner, because I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.